we decided to look at modern slavery. A lot of us did not know that there are more slaves in the world today than there have ever been. We did a survey. We found out how many slaves worked for us by looking at our possessions. And for the final part of our action project was to email a legislator. And a lot of you emailed Congresswoman McCollum. And a lot of kids were going, oh my, we're going to email a congressperson. What good is that going to do? This proves that your voice can be heard all the way in Washington, D.C. And with that, let's give a round of applause to Congresswoman McCollum.
Well, I know you have a lot of questions. I know you have a lot of questions, and I want to get to your questions. It's kind of hard. But I think it's important that we have a little bit of an understanding of what my job all encompasses, because yes, I do work in Washington, D.C., and I don't work for the president. I work for you. I work with the president. I'm in the legislative branch, so there's 3 branches, right? So I gave you one. The other, what's the president's branch called? Executive, and the third one is judicial. So I work in the executive branch. And there's 2 parts to the executive. There's 2 parts to the legislative branch. I'm in the House of Representatives. The other one's the Senate. Now we have the same basic job description, but they're a little tweaked. It's kind of like I'm in the House. I have a smaller area that I represent. I have all of Ramsey County, and then I have around the St. Croix River, which is the border between us and Wisconsin, right? I have from Stillwater to Woodbury in that area in Washington County. And because I have a smaller district, I represent, I'm able to represent and get around a lot easier in my congressional district than a senator who has, like Senator Klobuchar and Senator Franken, they have the whole state. So when you get the whole state, you only have to run every 6 years. But when you have a congressional district, how often do I run? Every 2 years. So that's the trade-off. That's the biggest difference between the two job descriptions at their basics. The other thing that's interesting is in the House, I have to be directly elected. No one can appoint me to serve in the House. The voters decide who represents them in the House. In the Senate, if something were to happen, and we did have a tragedy with Senator Wellstone's plane crash, after his plane crash, there was an opening in the Senate, and the governor of the state of Minnesota can appoint somebody to serve in the Senate, but the governor cannot appoint anybody to serve in the House. So that's another difference. And then the third big difference between the Senate and the House are some of the roles that we have. Is there something going on in the Supreme Court right now? We're down a justice, right? One of the justices passed away. So what the Senate does is the Senate advises and consents on ambassadors, and the cabinet of the President of the United States, and some of the other positions that the President has. The House isn't involved in that. The House, in the Constitution, says all the spending and tax bills originate out of the House. So I'm on the Appropriations Committee. So I just wanted you to know a little bit about my role in Congress. The second thing is I have 2 offices. I work in Washington, but I also work here in Minnesota. I'm here in Minnesota. Katie Conley, who's my scheduler, she made this happen today, by the way, so you can give her I work here. So I'm back here for the week doing a lot of different things. So let me, with that, just say the following. I'm really glad I'm here. There's a lot we could talk about, but there's personally 2 things you need to know about me. One, I'm not an attorney. You do not have to be an attorney to serve in the Congress of the United States, but that means I have to read really well, and pay a lot of attention to, you know, how laws are written. So I know a lot of the questions that you're going to ask me are legal in nature, but just as a jury, when you, the people who sit in judgment of people who are maybe going to be found guilty of a crime is a cross-section of America, so is the Congress. So I'm not an attorney. That's sometimes something that people are curious about. And then the most important job I have is being Katie and Sean's mom. And my son is 38 and is a professor at a university in Japan. And my daughter lives in Minnesota, and she's a victim's advocate. So a lot of the things that you're going to talk about with slavery and things like that, there's a lot of people who aren't attorneys and who are victims advocates. So this is how I'm going to turn it over to you. You're advocating on behalf of people who are victims with the research that you're doing and with the advocacy that you're doing to make sure people understand this better. So what I'd like to do, and I'm a former teacher, so I'm not going to call on anybody, because I know that you're well prepared. I'm going to try to get around to the room and ask different people to give me questions for about the next 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So what I'd like you to do is just give me your first name. I'm gonna hang onto the microphone, but I'd like you to speak into it. We shouldn't get any feedback so everybody can hear. So who would like to go first? Just raise your hand, stay calm. And I'm not going to get to everybody, so I apologize ahead of time. She's concerned about the slavery that's going on. So there's different types of human trafficking. There's the people who traffic for profit for themselves, the trafficker. So they're literally selling people. Sometimes it's children and young adults that are being sold into sex slavery. Sometimes it's people who are transported illegally to work in sweatshops, and I'll use that to kind of talk about the different businesses. And there's another form of, we're not calling it slavery so much, but it's taking advantage of very vulnerable people who want to escape circumstances. And sometimes these people are willing to go to work for someone. So in the Thai Burmese area, people will come from Thailand or from other countries, and they'll say, "Mother, you have five children. Do you have enough food for everybody?" And sometimes the mother will say, "No, it's been my husband and I don't have enough food to feed everybody." They'll say, "Well, we have a real good opportunity for your daughter to have a wonderful job. And she will have a wonderful life. And she will work for a lovely family, or she'll work for a lovely company. And she'll be able to come home and visit you. And she'll be able to, send money back to help the family. And then you don't have to worry about feeding her." And these parents sometimes will actually bring their children in and say, "Look at this wonderful opportunity we have for you." And sometimes these people will give the parents a little money. Here's a little down payment to help out your family. And they never see the child again. So you've been studying this, right? So what are some of the things that can happen to someone in this situation? Could they land up working in a factory? Yeah. And that factory is probably producing what? Maybe clothes? Do you think there's a chance that one of us in the room might be wearing something that has been made in a factory like that?
Most likely.
How are we supposed to know? Well, we are supposed to know. The United States signs trade agreements. And in the trade agreements, we tell the government, if we're going to buy your product, these are the following things we expect from you. No slave labor, no child labor. This is what we expect. Who enforces those agreements? The U.S.? Well, they kind of do, but we actually rely on the company. So if brand X, a great American brand, and let's say I'm wearing brand X shoes, has a factory, we tell that American company, working with the embassy, working with the host government, that they're all going to do what's called their due diligence, is that they're going to check on everything. They're going to enforce everything. Do you think that that's happening? No, it's not. It's not happening in most cases. So that's one form of slavery. What's another form of people who are taken advantage of, maybe over even in the United States? What's another thing that happens to people where they're forced into labor? They come across what border?
The Mexican border.
The Mexican border.
The Rio Grande.
They come across the Mexican border. And so these individuals are sometimes locked in the back of vehicles. They die. They have people smuggle them into the country. What do you think happens with some of these businesses that these smugglers are coyotes? Do you think that they're legitimate businesses where they pay a minimum wage and you have health care? And no. What do you think it feels like for the person when they realize that they're in the country illegally, and this person that told them they were going to get them this good job here in the United States? Do you think that they feel empowered to come forward or go to the police department or tell somebody that they've been taken advantage of and that they're chained up at night, they're locked into rooms? Do you think they feel like they can do that?
No.
No. So there is slavery that goes around in other parts of the world, and there's slavery that's going around right here in the United States, and it's something that the Congress is trying to do a much better job of enforcing. But quite often what happens is the individual who's the worker is the one who gets caught, right? And what happens to the employers in most cases? Nothing. So I think we need to focus on the employers. But we also have an immigration system that needs to be fixed. Now, I came here because I told you had a lot of questions, and I'm watching and I'm kind of stringing them out to you. And nobody's had, you can ask me a question on something else if you want to. Anybody over here have a question? Because I can talk for 30 minutes, that's not a problem. This gentleman here, back here, and then I'll put you here.
Congresswoman McCollum, what are your opinions of Trump running for president?
Well, first off, there's we have basically a two-party system in the United States. We have, what are the two parties? Democrat and Republican. But you know what's special about Minnesota? We're the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. We're DFL. So we're a coalition party here in Minnesota. So first off, I'm kind of... Thank you. First off, I'm going to be with the D team, the Democratic team, because that is a team that kind of shares some of the goals and objectives that I have of good immigration reform that protects and respects the dignity of everyone, better public education, improving on the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, building roads and bridges, so, and then protecting our environment. So that's why I caucus with the Democrats, because those are my top issues. So so we have Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. Now, on the other side, I am really glad that you guys are paying attention, but I'm going to go back to the Donald Trump question because this is disturbing to me. So, what is something that you learned early on from your parents and your grandparents? Do you learn to treat other people with dignity and respect? And the people who are your teachers, your mentors, your employers, the adults, the people who are leading the country, do you expect them to be speaking to other people with dignity and respect? So if you had a conversation with them, even if you didn't agree, you would feel that they respected you? This is a very big concern I have with Donald Trump. I think that he doesn't speak to women, minorities. I don't think he speaks to people in general with very much dignity and respect. And if you have someone who's going to be the leader of the United States, and that's going to be the image of the United States, I'm very concerned about that. Okay, so I'm coming over to that side of the room next. And you folks in the middle, you better kind of decide if you're going to get in, get out on this question.
So in our history class, we've seen many short videos on slavery in other countries, not in America. And they've interviewed a lot of the slaves and a lot of the slave masters. So we know where at least some of these slaves are, and we've talked to them. So why can't we go over there and do more?
So the biggest impact we can have is stopping the criminal activities from happening. So if there's sex trafficking, if there's American citizens going over to other countries to abuse people, we try to work with the other countries to identify who those individuals are and deny them passage. We say, you know, you're not wanted in country X because of what you've been doing, and if you get arrested over there, we'll do a little bit, but you know, we're on to you. What you do is improper, because sometimes some of that trafficking is going on in other countries, especially sex trafficking, because there's sex trafficking tourism. It's a terrible thing. So that's one way I know State Department's been working on it with other countries. We can't just go in another country with an army and start telling them what to do. We've kind of tried that in Iraq. That hasn't worked out so well, has it? Yeah. So, I mean, military might's one thing, but the military is not going to be the solution to this. The other thing, in Bangladesh, a couple of years ago, you would have been in grade school, there was a building that collapsed and a lot of workers died. And what the United States did to the Bangladesh government is they said, you know, we have been talking to you, and some of the European companies have been talking to you, and we're not going to allow your goods to be imported, and the EU was part of this too, until you fix the conditions in which people are working in, because they're inhumane. And people stood up, they paid attention, they straightened up and flied right. It's not perfect, but that's the best leverage that we have is in our trade agreements. And one of the things that Bernie Sanders has been talking about is how we shouldn't have this Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, TPT. And he's been talking about that a lot, and part of it is because he does not think it's a big agreement, but one of the things he's very concerned about is it doesn't have enough protections, not only for American workers, but it doesn't have enough teeth in it that when we know workers in another country are being abused, that we can go in with our State Department and with our Department of Commerce and say, that's not what is going to be happening for you to make that product where you're taking gross disadvantage of human beings, putting them in terrible conditions, and say that we won't allow that product to come over in order to change behavior. So that's a very good question.
I'm Hunter, and I'm wondering, what are you going to do about Minnesota pollutions in lakes and rivers?
Hunter wants to know what I'm going to do about the environment here in Minnesota. So I told you I was on the Appropriations Committee. Now the Democrats are in the minority, which means we don't get to bring the bills that we want to the floor. We don't get to make the final decisions. But we can influence the outcome of those decisions. And I'm the ranking member on, which means I'm the head Democrat on a committee called that's the Interior Environment Committee. So this is what I work on. I have a big passion about that. And when I was in the Minnesota State House, I was on the Interior Committee here. It was called the Environment Committee. So one of the bills that I'm working on is in Minnesota, well, heck, in the 4th Congressional District. Remember I said I have all of Ramsey County, and then I have Stillwater in that? You know, in the 4th Congressional District, we have 2 national parks? We do.
We have
Fort Snelling is a state park, but it's included in the national park. The Mississippi River, the signs that you say seen going over the Mississippi River with the arrowhead on it, look at those next time. It's saying that it's mineral. It's a national park system. And the St. Croix River is part of a national scenic park. But what I'm working on is a national park up in northern Minnesota. We have several national parks. Starts with a B. Anybody want to hazard a guess?
Boundary waters.
The Boundary Waters Wilderness Area and Voyageurs National Park. So there's something that you hear a lot of talk about, and that's mining in northern Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
How many of you, have a car in your family, that has steel in it, right? So we mine taconite. How many of you know anybody who has a cell phone? There's precious minerals in that in there, okay. I'll tell you what I'm working on. So part of the challenge is we want all this stuff, but a lot of it comes out of the ground. So there's been 2 big mining proposals in Minnesota, one called Polymet and one called Twin Metals. Now Twin Metals involves some federal leased land that are around in Voyager, around the Boundary Waters and Voyageurs National Park in a national forest area that we have, BLM, the Bureau of Land Management. And these leases were originally put forward in the 1960s when we didn't have the same environmental standards that we have now. And the type of mining that they're doing, which is called sulfite mining, is some of the most dangerous mining you can do to water. Because once sulfur gets in water, it destroys everything that's alive. And so one of the things that I'm doing is I'm saying, let's take a time out. The state's approved Polymet, that's probably been going through the court and everything like that. But in the most pristine, beautiful land that we have, where water is becoming a very precious commodity. Even here in Minnesota, we're realizing we need to take better care of our water. I'm trying to stop the sulfite mining from going through there. Another thing that I'm working on is, have you heard what happened in Flint? Flint, Michigan, oh my gosh. So Flint had been buying its water from Detroit. And during the Great Recession, Flint couldn't make all of its water payments. And so the state of Michigan said, you can't have water from Detroit anymore because you're not paying, the city of Flint and the homeowners aren't paying their bills because they've all lost their jobs. So it wasn't that they didn't want to pay their bills, they just didn't have any money. We're switching you to another water source. So they used a water source and they didn't test it to make sure it was safe for anybody, let alone kids. So the kids in Flint, Michigan have been drinking, or had been drinking, water that was loaded with lead. Do you know what happens to little children's brains when they're exposed to lead? Yeah, they don't connect. And the member of Congress from Flint, Michigan, his name's Dan Kildee, we were talking, I was trying to help him in getting the water source turn back into a better water source, and then we need to go in and fix pipes and all kinds of things that this bad water comes through. He said he was meeting with a young boy. He was probably just maybe a year or two younger than you folks. And he was with his dad. And he said to Dan, he said, you know, I can read and I hear the adults talk and I listen to the news. And he said, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to grow up smart no matter how hard I try. Because of the lead in the water. Not his fault. So we're working on that now no one in Flint can drink the water in the pipes, so all their water has to be brought in for bottles. You can't even boil. It's not like a bacteria where, you know, if you go up in northern Minnesota, you can drop some pills and make sure that, you know, it's safe to drink for bacteria. This is lead and toxic material that came out of the taps that mothers and fathers assumed that the government was protecting them, making sure that when they turned on their taps, there would be clean drinking water. So I'm outraged about what happened in Flint. It shouldn't happen anywhere in this country. And so I've been working with the people from Flint, from Michigan, and from the Michigan families there about what we're going to do to make sure that they have clean drinking water. But right now, the Republicans aren't helping me out very much. If the National Guard's delivering bottled water to drink, does that sound like an emergency to you? Yes. Yeah, I can't even get them to admit that we need to do some emergency funding right away. So thank you for your question on the environment. It's something I work on a lot. Now, can I scoot in here? So let's just be honest here. We live in a country that says, basically as part of its constitution, we're going to treat everybody with dignity and respect. All men are created equal, and I'm using men in the most generic sense. But when our first constitution and when our first legislation was written founding this country, were all people created equally? Yes, I believe all men and women are created equally, but did our laws treat everybody equally? No, they didn't. They allowed for slavery here in this country, and another thing it allowed for was women to be discriminated against. So there's a lot of discrimination that takes place in this country. So the question is, am I treated equally as a member of Congress? Well, there's one thing I know as of being a member of Congress, is that my wage is public, so the congressmen and the congresswomen get paid the same. We get paid the same as the senators. When I go on the floor of the House and I cast my vote, I have a voting card. This voting card doesn't care if you're a man or if you're a woman. So when I cast my vote on the floor of the House of Representatives, and somebody wants a bill to pass, and it's going to be a tight vote, they're talking to everybody. But something interesting happens to me at least once a week when I'm in Washington, and I don't have it on me right now, but I've served in Washington for 16 years, and I have a little congressional pin that I wear. And the men wear them too, and the people who are in charge of security for us are supposed to look for this pin. So just again, the other day, I was walking into the visitor center. This pin means I don't have to go stand in the lines to get to work. I can go around the metal detectors. And I had my pen on, and one of the Capitol Police was like, oh, by the way, I'm on the committee that funds the Capitol Police, and there's only 2 women on that committee, so you think the cops would all know who we are, because I do their paycheck, right? Ma'am, you, stop, I need to see your staff ID. You're supposed to have your staff ID out. And I said, well, that's going to be a problem, because now I'm like right in this person's face with my lapel pin on where it's supposed to be. That's going to be a problem because I don't have one. Well, then you'll have to get in the line. And I'm like, I'm a member. You don't look like one. What's that? You know, what's that supposed to mean? That's what I said earlier, because usually this question comes up from a young woman. So when I worked at Sears years ago, and I got promoted up into management, I had this great job, really loved it. This other gentleman and I got hired the same time to do this pilot project. You got your hand up here next. And we were in another state. We were looking at some carpeting and working on this plan on this carpet program we were going to have. And we got talking, and he said, you know, we've done really good. You know, we should go in and we should ask for a raise. And I said, yeah, we have. It's been a year. They're going to be reviewing us. And then he told me how much money he was making. I had more years with the company. I had a college education. I had more years in as a manager. And he was making thousands of dollars a year more than I was. So I went and talked to one of my superiors. And I said, hey, what's the deal here? Well, he's married, and he's the head of the household. And I said, well, he is married. I'm married. And head of a household, that's great. Him and his wife, that's a household. But I'm married with 2 kids. And the guy looked at me and said, it's just the way it is. So those of you, and we all have women in our lives. Some of us are women. Some of us all of us have mothers, right? Or we wouldn't be here. Grandmothers. Some of you have aunts and cousins. In Minnesota, there's been some pay equity laws put in place. So in Minnesota, women fare pretty close to equal in pay. But if you go in other parts of the country, it's not equal at all. So just when you discriminate against a mother in a family, whether she's a single mother or whether she's married, does that affect the whole family if she doesn't get the whole income? It affects everybody in the family, right? So you're hurting everybody. But most importantly, you're talking about slavery, and slavery is when you hold somebody hostage. And I worked with a lot of women at the time. When I spoke up to my supervisor, they said, don't do it. You're going to get us all in trouble. Just sit down and be quiet. I can't afford to lose my job. I won't back you up. I won't tell people how I'm feeling because I don't want to lose my job. So that's a form of work intimidation too.
McCollum. My name is Izzy. Hi, Izzy. Congresswoman McCollum, what are your views on abortion?
What are my views on abortion? Well, first off, that's a very controversial subject in our society, isn't it? It's very controversial. Some people say it's controversial because it is women are not given the ability to make their own personal choices about their own bodies, a discussion that never takes place with men. So some people look at it strictly as women should have as much control over their reproductive health choices as men. Some people look at it totally as a religious point of view. Some churches that people belong to say that to have an abortion, to make a decision to have an abortion, is wrong in their religion. Other religions are silent on it. The United States government, through the court speaking, has said a woman who finds herself pregnant in the first trimester of her life, in the first trimester of fetal development, can make a decision in this country to not follow through with the pregnancy. If a woman chooses to do that, I support that. But if a woman chooses to go through the pregnancy and needs help, I believe we need to be there to help that woman and that infant have a safe delivery and a healthy life, both of them. So this is a very, very complicated issue, and one in which let me close it up this way. One in which learning about how you feel about something and understanding how you feel about something is very, very important. But then it's also not being afraid to have those discussions in a respectful way, because sometimes people will disagree with you based on their religion or their point of view. So that was sometimes a very difficult question to ask, so thank you.
I know a lot of kids wanted to hear your best Obama story.
My best Obama story.
You got about 3 minutes.
My best Obama story. My very best Obama, he's not even president yet. He's not president yet. This is my best Obama story. He was running for president. It was 8 years ago. He called my office, my person on the office, because I was going to go down to Iowa and help him. So this is how the story starts out. Barack Obama dials the phone himself. He calls. He says, "Is Betty there?" "Who is this?" The person on the other end of the phone in my office said, "This is Senator Barack Obama." You know, he was running for president. And the intern said, "Yeah, right," and hung up on him. So, but we connected, and he said, "Can you come?" So I go down to Iowa, and this is 8 years ago. So he's on TV. Do you think there's many tall African Americans in Iowa? No. So he's been on TV in Iowa. It's the day after Christmas. Everybody's cranky in the bus, and he says to the Secret Service, "We're going over to the grocery store. We're getting cookies. We're going to get everybody all sugared up here and make everybody happy again." So we get to the grocery store, and there's this big line, because he walked in the grocery store. There's this big line. I'm not kidding. This line from here to about where this young woman here's sitting. Big line. People all lined up. And this little girl, she's about 4 years old. She comes running up, and she's at the end of the line, and she's bouncing like this, and I'm standing over here with it was Barack Obama at the time. This little girl's like, she's so excited, and she runs up, and she grabs his coat, leans down and says something to her, and she marches back to the line. She just stands there patiently, and I'm watching her mom, and her mom's like, "I want to get the bread and the milk, and I want to get out of here." So he talked to everybody. Now, can this little girl vote for him? No. His mom, the mom can, but the mom's staying off to the side. She kind of doesn't want to have much to do with this. And you're not going to be able to see me now, but he's a tall guy. And I was supporting him before, but he had my heart after this, because this showed me that he respects everyone. He got down on his knees so he could be eye to eye with her. That's why I might not agree with every single decision President Obama does, but I know every decision that he does it with dignity and respect for all of us. Thank you for inviting me.
Hold on a second, just 1 second. Quentin, I believe you have something for Congresswoman McCollum. Can you hold him up, Quentin, so everyone can see?
Oh my gosh, I'm so honored to give these beautiful
Oh, see, and it goes great with basic black skirts.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Congresswoman McCollum a round of applause.